Well, hello, and welcome to Gallifrey's Most Wanted. I'm Ross Aiken. I'm Old Who.
I will serve you until the stars decay and the cosmos is naught but a dying ember in eternity's fire.
And my name is Melvin Pena. I represent You Who.
Well, the next 5 minutes will do.
And we're taking one for the team today. And we're going to be covering Neverland, an Eighth Doctor story. The penultimate story of the first kind of story arc of the McGann era. And me and Melvin have some feels for two people who absolutely adore McGann.
Yes.
Yes, adore McGann. Like he's one of my top 3 doctors in some ways.
Yes.
Definitely on audio, it's a tie between him and Sixie because I'm just not making that choice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not strong enough to pick one over the other.
And you don't have to.
Yeah, you don't. And I've cut back on my Big Finish spending because it's spending, but those two doctors don't get missed.
Yeah. But yeah,
I
think I mentioned the other day, Ross, like this is Neverland and Zagreus really put to the test that idea that people will say, and I've said it myself, like I will pay money, right? I will pre-order if it is McGann reading the phone book. And Neverland and Zagreus really test your mettle, your strength when you say things like that.
Yeah, I think that the reason is twofold why you and me are having this reaction to this one.
Mm-hmm.
One is the quality of the work.
Yes.
It is not terrible. I mean, it is not. It's there. There is bad Big Finish. Yeah. There is bad Doctor Who.
That's correct.
Kill the Moon. Okay.
I won't go there. I love Kill the Moon.
Oh my God, you people are freaks.
But what's your second fold?
Right.
What's the second fold here?
Is how good Big Finish is now, and in comparison, art is, and I say this a lot in this podcast, that art is reflective of when it was created and when you are absorbing it and taking it in. And I think, but
and it depends.
Before I get to that comparison, let's kind of talk about.
There's also a third factor though, which is you say the quality of the work, but we need to separate that out because I am one of the people who shakes my head, hashtag SMDH as the youth say when people are like, oh, the scripts aren't very good. But here the script is not. It's just not good. Like the acting is great. Like McGann, India Fisher, not Mary Tam, Lala Ward. I mean, they're doing the best they can, and they're giving they're trying to perform,
and it's a great
and
cast.
The music's okay, and the sound effects are great, like all that kind of stuff. But the script is just bad. It's just not even it's not even a script. It's just anyways. Continue. We'll get there.
But let's talk about the story. The story, like you're saying, is it's not a bad idea. It is, and I know they're moving this because him saving. They make a big deal of him saving Charlie from the R101.
Yes.
And I always felt during that arc that it was a little overblown. He had done far worse things to the timeline in the history show. But I knew that was just, he needed that. They wanted a motivating theme in the background.
And that makes lots of sense.
And I like that. That's a good idea. That is a good idea. And I like this kind of ending. The evil Gallifreyan hierarchy is old. At this point, I think it's old. That you never see them as anything other than malevolent, manipulative,
or just boring bureaucrats.
Yeah. It's
literally 30% of this script is titles. I mean, it's just saying coordinator or under cardinal or acting president. It's
the bureaucracy
literally
of
30%
Empire.
of the script is just titles.
If you want to tell a story about Empire, and English writers should be able to tell it. When we get to the recommendations, I'm going to talk about something called Empire. And as an American, we can tell stories about how we became these officious international bureaucrats who pissed in people's pools. And that's interesting to me. You could have told an more interesting version of the story.
Yes.
And I think the concepts they wanted to do, the erasing of people from history, because I think of Argentina. What do they call the people when they disappeared? And stuff like that, where despots would just erase people, and to literally erase them from time. That's good.
There is, you're right. There is a compelling narrative in that concept. It's just not. It's not here.
It's 2 70-minute episodes.
It's nowhere to be found.
It is all over the place. We were talking that my problems with the script are so profound that I could mentally edit it as I was listening to it the couple times I listened to it and not miss a beat, because there was a lot of, for an audio, why are we going, you're jumping around, it's like a padded 6-part old school Doctor Who, where you repeat the same action over and over again in each episode to get your 25 minutes. So I don't understand, I just don't really understand some of the choices they made. And I like Alan Barnes.
Yeah, me too.
That's really shocks me. I really like Alan Barnes. He writes.
He knows.
I'm looking
he knows
forward
the
to
Eighth Doctor. He's like invested in it. Like it is.
It's
uncharacteristically. It's an uncharacteristically poor, almost sort of draft of a script. But before we go any further, Ross, we should pause and allow you to intercut the introduction and facts about this story.
Oh yes, let's. Okay, we're going to jump now because I forgot to, and I will have the wonderful synopsis from the Big Finish volume. Neverland. Story code 8L. Writer Alan Barnes. Director Gary Russell. Producers Jason Haig-Ellery, Gary Russell. Executive producer BBC Jacqueline Rayner. Released July 2002. The TARDIS is surrounded by the fleet of Type 70 TARDISes previously encountered in Embrace the Darkness, number 31. The Doctor is taken aboard a time station where Romana and Coordinator Vansell tell him that the time disturbances have been caused by anti-time. Legend has it that when Rassilon created the Eye of Harmony, history became set. But in doing so, he also created a mirror universe of anti-time. The anti-time has caused the history go wrong, and these incidents are all centered around Charley. Romana explains there could be a way out. Charley is turned into a gateway, and the TARDIS, with her on board, passes through the breach into the universe of anti-time, followed by the time station. The TARDIS lands on a small planet where Charley is menaced by ghosts of Never People, who then board the time station. It is then revealed that the planetoid is a wrecked TARDIS. A hologram of Rassilon tells them that he came to the Antiverse to battle Zagreus and is now suspended animation within a Zero cabinet awaiting rescue. Vansell, affected by the anti-time, negotiates with the Never People for the return of Rassilon. The Never People take Romana away, but the Doctor finds her and realizes that the Never People are all Time Lords who have been erased from time by their own people. He surmises that the hologram was lying. Indeed, it is revealed that the Zero Cabinet contains raw anti-time that will be taken back to Gallifrey and detonated. However, the Doctor manages to materialize his TARDIS around the time station just as it reaches Gallifrey. He knows that he is giving his life, but will save the universe. And Charley. Charley rushes to the ruined council room where she finds what appears to be the Doctor. However, he has turned evil and tells her that he has absorbed all the anti-time. He is no longer the Doctor. He is Zagreus. This is a great synopsis from the Big Finish Companion Volume 1 by Richard Dinnick, and this was Story 33 in the monthly range. All right, so now that you all have listened to me read something...
Now we're going to talk about
let's talk about the story. Basically, the story is this.
Yes.
The Time Lords capture the 8th Doctor and Charley because Charley being alive and not dying at the R101 has caused all this problem with the timeline. And Coordinator Vansell, a character I like a great deal, and he gets what he deserves in these stories. and it leads to us getting Narvin. So it's a
Yes.
death worth having.
I was definitely thinking about Narvin a lot during this. I'm like, man, that's
Like,
the other thing that would have improved this story is if it had been Narvin instead of Vansell.
Well, I think that what I like about Narvin is you think he's going to be another Vansell.
Yes.
But he's not.
Yeah.
Which I like is when you, instead of just giving you, like Barusa in the original TV show,
Yeah.
Every new Barusa comes with diminishing returns. I'm not a big fan of the later ones. I think the first two are better, especially the one in Invasion in Time. I think he's the best Barusa. But you get diminishing, and you don't need another one. So, and Vansell had been around since Sirens of Time. It was a good, I understand why they kind of write him out in these two stories. I like him. I like Lalla Ward as the president.
Yep.
And this kind of leads to the Gallifrey series, which the Gallifrey stories where she's president are a bit of a slog because she's such a pill. Victoria compared it when she listened to it as Hillary Clinton when she was running for president.
Or as Charlie very succinctly puts it in Neverland, and I love it's one of the things I do like about Neverland is that they Alan Barnes' script often comments upon itself and upon these things. So she calls Romana at one point Madam Icy Drawers.
Yeah, exactly. She is. Vic described her as Hillary Clinton because no one wants to be scolded all the time.
No.
And that's and
it's weird how
I love the Gallifrey. I love the Gallifrey series, but once she's not president and she and Narvin are running the resistance,
it's more interesting.
It's way more interesting. And Lalla Ward is great.
She's just very officious as the president, and it's really weird also the way she's characterized in Neverland because she seems to capitulate very easily to Narvin's sort of bloodless coup. Like there's no resistance when he like demands that she be left behind in the anti-time universe, and like it's just very strange how like at one point Vansell is like, well, let me explain how this goes, which is like I'm like great, another like endless exposition, and Romana's like the stage is yours, and I'm like, why are you being so like almost gleeful about how like awful he's being? It's so weird.
That thing got me too. It's like, is it supposed to be inferred that she knows that she has a better chance of stopping this by being teamed up with the Doctor? Because that's a Doctor kind of thing. It's like I'm having to guess what Alan Barnes' logic is for doing what you're talking about because it doesn't make sense, and there's no dialogue to where they just whisper each other about what they're going to do because there are a few scenes I like. The scene where they're tricking the villain by having the conversation and then having the conversation between whispering to each other. Fucking brilliant. Brilliant conversation. They are fucking great together.
Yeah.
I actually do like
really
their version of Sada. Yeah. They're good together. Lalla Ward and McGann are good together.
Yep.
But that scene was one of the few highlights. But it's just like there's a lot of exposition. It takes forever to get somewhere. I thought it was a 4-parter. I had remembered it wrong, and I went, "Wow, is this one long one?"
Yeah,
and
it really just feels like a 4-parter.
It's the same length.
There are a couple points where, especially when I think Charlie's being which again is really weird. They're opening the breach through Charlie, and I'm like, that just the language you're using just sounds weird and invasive and even like weirdly psychosexual in a sort of way. I'm like, anyways, and she starts to scream, and I'm like, okay, here comes the theme song, and there's no theme song. I'm like, oh, okay, guess we're just going to the next scene then.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know why they did the way they did these the way they did. The structure is off. Zagreus' structure is freaking long.
Yeah, that's
I mean, it's incredibly long. But I think they were trying to do a payoff to. I guess, is this the first 2 seasons? Do they break them into 2 seasons? I think it was 2 seasons.
Yep.
I use this site called Clive's Databank because I like where he inserts stuff when I kind of agree with him more often than not. And he breaks it into seasons, and I treat it as seasons because, I paused on my great rewatch at McCoy, and I watched McCoy a while back, and I just don't want to watch McCoy right now. But when I get to McGann, I was thinking I'll start and do it in my headcanon order, which is the 3 Mary Shelleys, then Charlie, then Lucy Bleed Miller. and then go back to whatever McGann was after Charlie.
I think we're right, because I think the first season, as it were, of McGann and Charlie, or 8 and Charlie, goes from Storm Warning through, I think Minuet in Hell is actually the season finale of that season, and then Invaders from Mars
What's after Minuet?
What's after of this season?
Yeah, I think you're right. Minuet in Hell, which is not the last one of these that I didn't like, because it was a terrible Buffy rip.
Yeah.
It done badly. It's not, and one, what in the, their knowledge of America and how we is really,
it's
I think some of the time, it's fucking Jesus, man.
It leaves much to be desired.
Oh my God! Because they call the president they even do it in the regular show Dr. Dobby's story.
Utopia, Sound of Drums, all that stuff. Yeah.
Sound of Drums, where they refer to the president as president-elect. Yeah. It's like, you fuck ass. That just means the guy that just
won the election. He's not in power at all. Yeah.
No. And then and then they said, I think they made mistakes, and then said it was due to the time problem.
Yeah.
Like when they called Benjamin Franklin a former president in Invasion in Time. Yes. I said, I don't think that was planned. I think you fucking morons didn't look shit up.
Yeah, that kind of stuff you can sort of explain away as like, it's the Doctor Who universe, so whatever. Like, doesn't have to. But yeah, that's one of the another one of the sort of weird things about Neverland and the structure is that it sort of plays out like a clip show. Sort of because it's bringing back like story points from earlier episodes as though it's all building to something, where it really doesn't build to something. They're just rehashing old episodes. And so you get to the very end of Neverland where I'm like, okay, Charlie and the Doctor have this really like emotional scene together. And I'm like, okay, on the 4th or 5th time I listened to this, and I had to listen to it multiple times, Ross, because I think the first 3 times there were points where I'm just like, I just zoned out because they were just explaining something again. Like it did not draw my attention or hold my attention. And so I get to the end, maybe the 4th or 5th time, and I'm like, oh, here's this nice emotional scene between the Doctor and Charlie where Charlie's like, if you just kill me, everything will go back to normal. Because, the Never people know that McGann won't kill her. But then I'm like, okay, great scene. And then Rassilon appears out of nowhere, and and the Doctor has to literally recap all of their adventures together. And I'm like, what? What are you doing? Like, we've already recapped all of the adventures over the course of the last 2.5 hours, and now you're doing it again? Like, it's so insane.
It makes no fucking sense. It doesn't. Because if this had been trimmed, there's the good things. The Zagreus mystery. What is Zagreus?
Yes.
And the hints. You don't need to explain everything. They're giving you the hints. Yeah. And then I don't mind Rassilon appearing.
I don't either, but it doesn't make that also doesn't make any. It just doesn't make any sense. Because I'm like, because the Rassilon that we have for most of the story isn't Rassilon, and then Rassilon does appear at the end. I'm like, where is he coming from? Is he even real? Is he just like a figment that is appearing? He appears to the Doctor and to Romana at the very end, and I'm like, where is it? Where even is he? What's he doing? As the Rassilon from that we saw throughout the story. And Ross, here, let me walk this back a tick egg, because I had to, after again listening to it at least 5 times, I had to sit down and be like, what is the story? Because you just did the recap, but the recap doesn't tell you what actually happens. So like, I wrote this down so that for the benefit of our audience, so that we did this, like you said, we took one for the team, and the team is the listeners of Gallifrey's Most Wanted. Like, we did this labor so that you do not have to. So here's what happens in order. Rassilon builds the oubliette, and this is way back in the day, right? The CIA uses it to disappear people, as you were saying earlier. And again, this is a potentially really strong source for drama. But it's like extreme execution. And I spell that like in the 90s with just an X. Extreme execution. And this creates anti-time. Does this make sense so far? Is this tracking with what you experienced?
Exactly.
And then Centris, who is the weird Charlie voice throughout the whole episode, which annoys the hell out of me, does quite a few.
It's what if it's Indian fishing. Brenda Vaccaro had a love child. Hello, how you doing? I'm Ari Firestein. It's all I could think about is India Fisher sitting there chain smoking
yes.
Pall Malls. It's awful.
So Centrist,
and she has such a great voice.
I know, and they absolutely just massacre it. But so she does quite a few of these, and as I understand it, it is she and her Never people that she realizes are there that start spreading the myth of Rassilon across cultures and worlds. Again, this is how I understand it. The next thing that happens in story order is that Doctor Who saves Charlie Pollard from the R101, which creates this passable breach, as they keep calling it, this gateway to the anti-time universe. It just sounds so ludicrous. At which point, Centrist starts popping back and forth. And then, again, this Rassilon myth, the plan is that with this Rassilon myth, they will entice Gallifrey to come to the anti-time universe and provide them safe passage back so that they can destroy the Eye of Harmony. That is what I understand. Does that make sense to you? Is that that is how I understand the story? And then, of course, that's where we pick up the
little outline is a good outline for a good story. I think there is a good outline for a story.
There is a good story here. I mean, it's to be found.
It is, but it just doesn't. It never quite gels, and that's the problem. I think because this was written in 2002.
Yeah,
it was made. It was released in. Yeah, that's when it came out. So it was probably recorded. They don't. I don't think they recorded as far in the future as they do
these days.
Nowadays. Yeah. But
backstage. Here we go. Recorded in January 2021 and January 2001 and February 2002. So yeah, it was. Let me see. And it says July 2002. So yeah, maybe 4 or 5 months beforehand that it was recorded.
Yeah. So I mean, I know they wanted a big payoff. I know. So 2000 and Zagreus comes out 5 months later.
Oh my God.
It's a gap, and I think it's coming out for 2003 would be the 40th anniversary.
Yep, correct.
So that may be it. The kind of their why.
Yeah.
The why they're doing it, but it is just you have what you said. That's not a bad outline for a Doctor Who story.
Yep.
You've got, at least they didn't call it the Thing of Rassilon, whatever, the Oubliette out of Eternity. They at least, everything was the
sash
the
of
toilet
Rassilon,
brush of toilet brush of Rassilon. So it's just insane. It misses on so many parts. It never devolves into terrible. It's just dull.
Yeah. And
does that make sense?
And like I was saying,
I don't think it's terrible.
Like I was saying at the very beginning, the only thing that really salvages this is the voice acting. Because again, McGann, India Fisher, Lala Ward, they're really giving it all they can to what must for them have been like absolute. And Romana actually highlights this too. Like I said, Alan Barnes, there are parts in the script where it feels like he understands that this isn't really very good at all either, because here it is. I've got the quote written down. So Romana at some point says, here it is, the Doctor is full of surprises, but his one abiding characteristic, whatever body he wears, whatever gibberish he speaks, however erratically he acts, is his unerring sense for what's right. And I just like, again, hearing her say whatever gibberish he speaks, I'm like, yes, this entire thing has just been, and I know McGann talks about it in some of the behind the scenes of later Big Finish stuff, where he's like, I'm Captain Exposition in this story, where he's just like explaining and like giving you the rundown and like summarizing, and it's just it's stultifying, Ross. Like I feel dumber after having something like this explained to me, because it is just gibberish. Yeah. They're just speaking absolute gibberish.
It has all of the qualities of bad TV science fiction. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just went into Zagreus was released on the 21st of November 2003. Yeah,
that is a long gap to be left with.
And that is 3 days, but 3 days before the 40th anniversary. Yeah. So.
And the other thing I was going to say is that
Melvin has volunteered to come back in a few months when we do Zagreus.
Thank God for that gap.
That is one that when I first listened to it, this one I remembered it more kindly.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say this is, when I came out, I loved it. And when I listened to it years later, I went, this is a little long. Yep. But I think what has happened over these past 20-some years, the quality of Big Finish they've progressed. Yep. They Sirens of Time I loved it, and I have a warm soft spot for it. But it is very, very basic.
Oh yeah.
Big Finish. It is. It's kind of like the first Iron Man movie in the Marvel Universe, where they said, we're going to do it simply.
Yeah, and I love that about it.
We're going to do, and that makes sense.
Yep, there's
so
value
they did
in that.
Simply, and they got better and better and better. And then we're going to go into the Divergent universe, which I enjoy.
Yes, me too.
Most of it. There are more misses in the Divergent era that I think there are in some of the first 2 seasons with Charlie. I don't think there are many misses in Charlie. Minuet in Hell is really the one I think is glaring. Yeah.
That's the one where they make her into a sex slave, or like in some sort of again they call it Malabolgia, but for some reason I kept reading it as Georgia, and I'm like, this is just bad, and like I don't know that there are really any kind of like politician run sex slave dungeons in Atlanta.
They're normally in Matt Gates' district in Florida.
But yeah, the other thing that sort of saves this for me or redeems it, and I was going to actually before that, I was going to say, like you, I mean, my experience with this, my first experience was much more recent. So it was about 10 years ago. And I've told this story before on various podcasts that I came to the 8th Doctor audios when I was rehabbing from ACL reconstruction surgery on my knee. And so, it really gave me a lot of impetus to continue doing the PT on my stationary bike that, I would listen to one of these episodes, like 30 minutes, do my exercise, and I'm like, okay, and then I've got a cliffhanger, and I'm ready for it the next day. And so when I first came to it, it was in the context of this is something to take my mind off of the unending searing pain that is shooting up my body from my right knee. And I didn't really I valued it for the voices more than the narrative. Like coming back to it now about 10, 11 years later and, expecting, like you said, like having all of this Big Finish experience behind me now, like just really sort of shocking how almost anti-narrative this is. Like everyone in this story is talking about the heresy of anti-time. Like I wish they would talk about the heresy of anti-narrative. Like it's not a story. It's just people explaining things to each other for 2.5 hours. And that is brutal. It is a brutal experience.
Yeah. And to go back to my point is you don't have that in McGann, Doctor Who.
No, not usually. Nope.
No.
Hardly ever.
No, they're hit or miss, but I think for the most part, and back to, I like the Divergent universe because I like Karis.
Yes, me too.
And there's some really great experimentations, and then there's some really kind of Space 1999 kind of science fiction stories, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I was watching Space 1999, my wife was like, "What are you watching?" And I said, "It's just an old British science fiction show." But it's a little more, they try things because it's audio. They can do whatever they want.
And that I loved about the Divergent arc. Like, it was weird. It was unsettling. Like, again, what we were talking about, this the disappearing people, like, that's a rich vein to mine for drama, and they fail to. Like, with the anti-time Zagreus Divergent universe arc, it's like you have a time, and they set that up, or at least they try to in this story. We were communicating over the past sort of couple weeks about this, and, we would excuse it to each other by saying, Neverland, it's a setup for Zagreus, it's a setup for the anti-time, for the Divergent arc, which I get that, but, they super belabor it, and, the setup doesn't give you, you could work even harder to make the setup more dramatic, which is, the Time Lord in a place without time is naturally going to feel disoriented. And again, for what I was going through about trying to learn how to walk again and all this kind of stuff, I understood, I could wrap my head around feeling completely alien to your body or to yourself. Like, I got that part, and I like the Divergent universe for that, because McGann, the Doctor, was unsettled for that arc. But these, to have Neverland and then Zagreus to set that up, it just feels like you're doing a lot of work for not setting up what you're actually gonna do, which is weird.
Yeah, because it really doesn't have anything to do with it.
It has nothing to do with it.
Nothing to do, and it's just shocking. And it's like, basically, if you were to take Zagreus and, geez, this is basically a season, one of their like seasons in McGann. Because they're, you know what I mean? It's the amount of time you've got.
Yep.
This is basically Neverland's basically a 5-parter, and Zagreus is basically a 6 or 7-parter because it's 3 discs.
Yep.
It's also the 50th release. That's why they held it back. So it fell into the 50th slot. This is the 50th release.
Oh, yeah. I got you.
Zagreus is. So that's, I'm looking up because I'm on the Zagreus page in front of me so I could see when it came out. They saved it as the anniversary thing. And I'm not a big fan of most anniversary specials sometimes. I like what they've done though. What was their 50th one? The light at the end of whatever.
Oh, light at the end was lovely. Yes.
It was lovely.
Especially the interactions between the McGann Doctor and the Tom Baker Doctor, which, you know, for all the clamoring that people did about how much they enjoyed that, the fact that Big Finish never did that again is kind of weird because they just got on so well. But yeah, this one is just exposition and bloat, and it is.
Yeah.
It's dull, and it's like it makes me feel bad. It makes me feel bad about watching the Big Finish.
Well, it's not a good, and it's also just not a good ending for this first Charlie story. No. She's too good a character to her be unimportant to it.
I mean,
that's the other thing is she is so
sidelined.
She is just a plot. She's sidelined.
Aside from being made again, like we're gonna the image or like the words that they used and the fact that you couldn't see what they were doing, but you know you're left to your own devices to imagine how they're opening the breach. And I'm like, I just had the most disgusting like images in my head of like them setting her up in like one of those Saw devices from the Saw movies. And I'm like, this just feels wrong. It feels weird. It feels gross. It felt more exploitative of Charlie as a character than Minuet in Hell, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
Because I mean, so little happens over the course of 2.5 hours. And we basically go from one scene of monologuing and exposition to another, and all we really do is change locations for people to talk endlessly at each other.
With voice modulation, you know. I mean, it's. I mean, we're beating it to death, and I think let's.
Yes.
Let's kind of move on to a couple things we like.
There are good things.
Paul McGann and India Fisher's chemistry, chef kiss. The beginning part where they're being chased, it's great. Where she's like, "No, you're not going to drop me off somewhere. I'm going to hit the fast return space. I'm going to force you to fight these people." Great. Lala Ward, when her and like I said earlier, her little scene with Paul McGann, great. But that's about it.
Yeah,
that's all I got.
For me, I mean, there are good things, and I made a point of making note of them, and there are some like the joy that you can hear in Paul McGann's voice, especially this is 20 years ago. Like there's an energy and a verve to the way he performs Doctor Who that is infectious, even in a story as dull as this, when he's like either literally just giving you exposition or being sort of sassy with either Romana or Centris or whoever. Like there's a joy in his voice when he laughs. You can feel it, and I really love that about McGann's voice acting. Is like I don't know that any of the other Doctors that when they are joyful that it is communicated as viscerally as when McGann is happy. And like again, just the joy in his voice is so it's so effusive and so tangible, and I really have a lot of time for that. And it does go a little bit to, eventually, every once in a while there is a good line, and I'm like, how is this possible in a story like this? Yeah. So like, and there's one here where he introduces Charlie to Romana, and just the way he speaks the inverted phrase. He's like, "Romana, this is Charlie, one of my best ever friends. Charlie, this is Romana, one of my best friends ever." And then that's followed by cold, bitchy hellos from both Charlie and Romana. And that moment is lovely. And I'm like, oh, there are just moments where you can see, again, Alan Barnes knows how to write Doctor Who. And, like, his dialogue is always really good. He's the one who wrote the one that we loved from the Further Adventures about Guy the gorilla.
Oh, I know. I mean, he came back to write more Charlie. She's, you know, I'm looking forward to I get it this week, is all the 14th Doctor comic strips. The collect. It's coming in the mail. And so we will be scheduling a time for you, me, and Mark to jibber jabber about it. But I like Alan Barnes. I just think, I want to go back to the thing is, I think we're probably harsher on it because we've seen them do so better. It's like, you know, you've progressed so far with your storytelling. And this isn't a dig at Alan Barnes. No,
of course.
I'm
sure there were mitigating circumstances.
What I'm about to say, but there are some writers now for Big Finish who are, in my opinion, better writers than Alan Barnes. There are a couple. Dorney.
Yes.
Lisa McMullen.
Roy Gill.
Roy Gill's very good.
These new ones that started during the pandemic, Lauren Mooney and Stuart Pringle, like every time they have a new story, they just knock it out.
Yeah, and they're trying different things, and they've really found, and I think a lot of it has to do with Nick Briggs and his script editors and his producers like Richardson and them. They really know how to craft these things. And they still miss. I think the first Christopher Eccleston box set is lacking.
Yeah, the less we say about that one, the better. And, you know, it was revealed that Mark,
the next one's
Mark from Trap One bought that one on vinyl. And I'm like, I felt real bad for him because he bought Ravagers on vinyl.
Yeah, it's rough. But they were trying for safe.
Yeah.
They really wanted to try for safe, and I don't think you needed to do that. You got Christopher frickin' Eccleston.
Yeah.
But I think it was they got him and they had to kind of not hold his hand, but Nick was like, he's a friend of mine. I've worked with him, so it's just going to be me and him.
Yeah.
And then they handed it off to someone else, and it was like, wow. Because I don't know who the producer is now. I think it's Richardson. It might be David Richardson.
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
But you know, I've enjoyed those. Just can we have a whole series where it's McGann and Guy the gorilla?
Yeah, that would be lovely.
Or have Eccleston run into Guy the gorilla and them going for adventures. I don't care.
Again, there are moments. There are moments in this. Like we have really torn at a new one, as it were. We've opened a breach in Neverland, but I mean, even Neverland. Like, sorry, now I just found another thing that I hate about this story, which is the conceit of the Peter Pan stuff. Like, it's such a weak thread. And like they somehow made it the backbone of the whole story. This Never people, and I'm like,
you know,
it doesn't
even
fit because they're not the Lost Boys.
Never even.
You know, they're awful. They're awful people.
Oh, and there's a missed opportunity was, you know, the two childhood friends of Romana
that she had just forgotten.
What she had forgotten. I think you could have given Lala Ward a better moment of acting is where since she's near them, the memories flood back.
Which would have been a nice contrast with the stuff at the end where once Vansell is infected with anti-time, they find out that the further away he is from the source of the anti-time, the less under its influence he is. So that would have been a nice parallel also, that the closer she was to them, the more she remembered them.
And the more grief she would feel.
But of course that's not there. And they don't allow Romana to feel grief.
Which is, I mean, Lala Ward's a good actress. It's just, I don't understand that kind of, you know, it was Doctor Who by the numbers. It was, they used the formula, but then they didn't give it needed a trim. Yeah. It needed some heavy editing.
Yeah. It really feels like a first draft.
I was kind of looking forward to it, and then I listened to it, and I went, wow, you remember this different, or it's different because you're different? Yep. And I was like, when you said this is really dull, it was like, thank God he said it. Because I was going, Melvin's going to love this, and I'm going to just want to bash it. And then it was like, oh, thank God. Thank God.
Like I said, it really tested me. It really tested my patience and my willingness to listen to Paul McGann, which was kind of sad.
It might have it sucked my will to, like, live at some moments. Like, please don't let me die suddenly and this be the last Doctor Who I ever hear.
But again, like, even so, there were moments. And, another line I had written down here, listening to McGann say, when they come upon the wreck of the blasted TARDIS in the Anti-Time universe, which again we realize later isn't a TARDIS, and the casket of Rassilon doesn't contain Rassilon. So like all this stuff, like we are being tricked as well, and it just like it falls. Anyways, he notices the shapes of what Charlie and he recognize to be a wrecked TARDIS, and he says, "Twisted and blasted and crusted with rust and decay." And there's something poetic about that line. And I'm like, why are there, even in a script this bad, there are gems to be found, There are brief moments where the good writing it's there. It's like, why isn't it like, but it's ligature to endless segments of exposition.
Yeah, and McGann is so good. He lifts up his bits, and same with India Fisher. Yep. Yeah. So, and when they're together, it's magic. Yep. And I mean, I think this is the first story where they say they say "I love you" to each other, and that comes in that segment right at the end where they're like, Charlie is saying, we can put all this to rest if you more or less if you kill me, and McGann's like, I can't. You're my friend and I love you, and I just like there's even a lost opportunity at that moment, because you're like, this is the moment where the music should drop out. And it just continues. And I'm like, no. I know. Oh, my God. All right. Well, folks, hey, we're going to wrap this up before we're going to keep beating this dead horse carcass of a story. I mean, I hate to say it. It's not as bad as I don't think it's as bad as some of the stuff I've said. But there are elements that are just like, I'm disappointed. I love Big Finish, and 99% of the time, it sings, and the other 5% it just doesn't speak to me, and that's the nature of it. But this one, it was just because I've gotten so used to most of what I hear of the Eighth Doctor being so great. This is just so adequate, So,
I would recommend that. I would recommend if you're doing an 8 and Charlie listen through, and for some reason you're listening to podcasts before you listen to the episodes, like just listen to podcasts about Neverland, and then just move on with your life. Don't listen to that. Don't put that energy in it. You don't.
Someone
needs to do the Hobbit, where they cut it down and made all 3 films into one film. If someone would do that with Neverland, it would be great. Like even with just what's here, you could, like you were saying, you were editing it in your head. Someone please do that. Someone please make a listenable version of Neverland, and you will be hailed at the court of the Demon Kings forever.
And merge it with Zagreus, because
just put them both together.
No, put them both together. So, all right. So I'm gonna do my recommendation first, because there was things about Empire we're listening to, and the only thing that struck me, I'm listening to a podcast called Empire. It is hosted by journalist Anita Anand, who is a Brit of Indian descent and a journalist, and William Dalrymple, who is a British historian whose expertise is India. They had written a book about the history of Kohinoor together, the Kohinoor diamond together, and they decided to do a podcast. And what they did, they start with the British Empire and really lean into India, because that's their expertise and then when they finish that story, and they're friends, they laugh, they have a fun conversation. She teases him about the way he introduces himself. She lives in England, he lives in India, which I find very funny, because he's the Caucasian, he's the white person, he lives in India, she's the brown person, she lives in, she's from Richmond, but Richmond, England. But they have a good time. They have great guests, and they went from that. Then they did, I can't remember the second empire they did. It was the Ottoman Empire. Then they did the history of slavery, and they've now done the Russian Empire. And I've just listened to the last one, which was entitled Putin's War. And they're great. They're about an hour long. They do 2 a week. I'm a big history person, but being an American, person. We only learn Western European history, and not even all of our own history, because we don't want to upset people by telling them of the bad shit our ancestors did.
It's true.
It's not just listening to Think About Empire. You find out there are bad people all over the fucking planet that have done shitty things for power. But it's really entertaining. It's really informative. It has really made me see some of the things that I knew about partition, and then I forget the name of the partition in North Africa after the First World War, where two people from England who'd never lived there or been there had expertise in it. Just as the host of this podcast of Empire is they just used a crayon and drew an imaginary line. Mm-hmm. And it did damage. And it's entertaining because they're having a good time and they're such good friends. They pick and tease each other. It's a nice conversation. They have great guests. It's really, I think, folks, it's something to look at in the world we live in now, that we are at this place because of all these different moments in history of we've damaged society by empire. And it's not just the Americans. They haven't even gotten to us yet. But, the English Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Russian, their slavery. It's just so good. I've gone through 95 episodes. I really am only listening to it. I jump into Doctor Who podcasts, and I have a couple go-to. I just needed to cleanse my nerd palate. I needed less nerd podcasts, and I wanted something a little more educational that wasn't related to current American politics, which was what I was kind of filling the gap. And it's just wonderful. It's great. I listen to it on Spotify. I will be caught up sometime in the next month or so. I finally made it to 2024, but they do a lot. But it's worth it. So please check it out.
My recommendation is, and I've done a lot of the same stuff. I can't remember when. I think our last podcast was. What did we talk about? We talked about Blood Tide, I think, and I was a little bit nerded out at that point, and so I did the same thing. I started listening to a bunch of the BBC Radio 4 In Our Time podcasts with Melvin Bragg. Because A, it's a great podcast. B, there's like 3 great scholars every episode, and at the end they always ask Melvin if he wants coffee or tea, and I'm always like, coffee, please. Even though I know they're not talking to me. But my recommendation this week is I watched a movie last night called Perfect Days. This is a movie that came out in 2023. This is a Wim Wenders film in cooperation with a Japanese scriptwriter named Takuma Takasaki. It came out last year. It's about a sanitation worker, and God, I'm tearing up even thinking about it, which is such a dramatic switch from the narrative we were just talking about. It's like there's an actual story here, and it's like it's his daily life. There's nothing more complicated than there's no real conflict in it. It's just observing. They drop you into his life, and you live several days with him, and that you get into his routine, you get into his habit, and then you start to see how variations on that, how challenges affect him. And it's a really powerful, really beautiful film about, it's basically, the idea that most men lead lives of quiet desperation, and this is sort of the opposite of that. There's a feeling of, throughout this film, it's suffused with serene contentment at the wonder and the beauty that's around us, which, Neverland is just, there's none of it in Neverland.
Yeah, I'm looking at, I'm really interested because I love Wim Wenders. I think he's a masterful director.
It is absolutely
and that he's up for Best Director for it, and it's not up for Best Picture.
Which is shocking.
No, it's up for Best International Film. Oh, he's not up for Best. It's only up for Best International Film.
Well, it should win that handily because this is one of the best. I only saw it once last night, and the more I think about it, I'm like, it may be one of the best movies I've ever seen. It's so good and it's so involving. There's a lot to learn from this guy who more or less cleans toilets, and you don't know why. His family comes into the film at some point, and you can tell that they're disappointed in the fact that he is a toilet cleaner, more or less. But there is people I've seen talk about in reviews that he takes pride in his work, but I don't think it's that. Pride is the wrong word for it, because pride is like, that's something you feel about yourself. I think for him, there's a dignity in work, There's a dignity, and we were talking about that before we got on here, about hospital workers and sanitation workers and maintenance workers, like that they make the world go, and we treat them very badly. And in this film,
we pay them the
yes,
least.
and in this film, how people treat him is like that's not the point. What the point of this film is how he encounters and approaches the world, and he does it on his own terms, by his own standards, and it's really, really beautiful to see him and that sense of dignity.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check it out. I do love Vin Beater. I've never seen a movie of his that just didn't blow my mind.
So good.
Wing. Was it Wings? What was that?
Oh,
Peter Falk.
I know which one you're talking about. I can't remember the name of it though. It's like Wings
yeah,
of
but
Desire.
Peter Falk plays Wings of Desire, and Peter Falk plays a fallen angel.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
I think isn't that the one
it's
that's
amazing.
got there's a song by like U2 in the soundtrack?
Yeah. I think so. And then he did a movie with U2. Yeah. But he's a great German director. So. All right, folks, so next week is... Okay, so this is Paul McGann. Next would be... It will be... The next one will be the next Christopher Eccleston, which I don't have in front of me which one's next.
Which one did you do last?
So, I don't know because I didn't look. So, I will probably be talking to Melvin once we hang up, to pick that one out because it'll probably be him. I kind of want to figure out how I'm going to divide those up to make them last, but I feel with those three, he says 3 story box sets, aren't they? 3 story box sets. It may be best to just do all 3, but I just got to see where I'm at and what's next. So, but folks, as always, hey, thank you for listening, and we look forward to seeing you somewhere in time or space.